morning, and thank you for joining our class today. Will be covering the year-end process. We will be going through GL archive and 1099 process. Our class agenda here is preparing for 2022 close. We'll also be covering process for advancing to the next fiscal year. We will be using January through December 31st as the fiscal year in this webinar. We will be talking through the process for archiving the 2022 general ledger data and processing 1099s, as I stated. And then last, we'll go through all of the available resources for you as a user within the Sage 100 Contractor application. I also wanted to mention that it's very important that you have access to the database administration tool on your Sage server in order to perform the general ledger archiving process. And as we discussed during our last webinar, you also need it to archive your payroll. When I initially recorded this class, the update was going to be released next week. That was actually released on Friday of last week. Today is December 28th. So you should have that in your mailbox. And just as a reminder, you do not want to update your system until you have completed the 2022 payroll tax year. So first, we're going to talk about how to prepare to close 2022. These are just basic steps for closing the general ledger. This could be performed even if you're not going to be archiving the general ledger. So first, you're going to want to create a secure folder to house all of your year-end GL reports in. We want to definitely make sure that's secure, that only you have access to that folder. We'll go through the reports, the recommended reports to run for year-end. You don't have to archive your records prior to moving to period 1 or January of the next fiscal year. So hopefully you're in December as your default posting period, and you do not have to archive to move to January. When you advance from period 11 to 12 in your current fiscal year, period 1 of the next fiscal year opens and is available. And what that means is, in your system in 1/6, if you are currently in period December as your default, you can pop into 2023 using this drop-down arrow, and you'll see that January of 2023 is open and available for posting. Notice that the rest of the year for 2023 is not open. That will not open, and those months will not become available for posting until you make January 2023 your default posting period. You can have multiple years of data open, and you can choose to archive as often as you want. My recommendation would be to archive your general ledger every other year or every couple of years, but I really like to have, at least one, the prior year's data available for when you run reports, because archiving it actually removes that fiscal year data and creates a new database for that data. So if you like to have the data accessible and at your fingertips year over year, then you would want to not archive. But you definitely still want to go through these preparation steps just to make sure you're ready to close the year, you've cleaned up the year. Archiving payroll is a separate process, as we talked about during the last webinar. You want to make sure that you've completed all of your transactions and corrections for the oldest fiscal year. So, if I was, archiving every other year, I'd be archiving 2021. So you want to make sure that your CPA entries are in, any audit errors on the general ledger side are cleaned up, that type of thing. You must have exclusive access to archive the general ledger and have access to the database administration tool. So that means that nobody on the team can be in Sage while you're archiving the general ledger. And you also need to have access again to the database administration tool housed on your server. You want to make sure you definitely have a current backup of the system before you move forward. Your system should be backing up every night, but definitely Sage recommends that you have at least 2 backups before you archive. So you would want to back up manually. You're going to want to make sure you go through the trial balance, at least the balance sheet accounts, and make sure that you know and understand the balances. It's a great time, during year end to be reviewing those balances. Make sure that you have supporting documents for all of those balances on your balance sheet. You also want to make sure that your job cost tie to the income statement. I didn't put the reports on here, so we'll go through that. And what does that look like? What reports do you run to make sure that they tie? So back into Sage, we're going to go to Accounting Reports 2-3 Income Statement, and we'll just run the basic 21 report. I like to skip 0 accounts, and then I'm going to change this to January through December. So you want to run the report for the whole year, and I'll just run it to this screen. That over. And the project management report, or the job report that I typically ran, was 6/1/21, and then I just changed the period for the year, January through December. Then this is your job cost total for the whole entire year by job. So if I go over to the right, this is the total job cost for the year, $1.8 million. Looking at my income statement, the direct expense range, which is our cost of goods sold range, is 1.8 million. So you want to make sure those are in balance. I mean, it's 10 cents off, but it's not material to me. I'm not going to look for 10 cents. So as long as those tie, that's what the PowerPoint presentation was referring to. You also want to make sure your AP and AR subledgers tie to the balance sheet. So you can run AR aging and AP aging, and just make sure that the number, the total at the end of the report, ties out to the number that's on the balance sheet represented in each, one of those accounts, your accounts receivable and your accounts payable. That should never be off, but you just want to make sure that it ties. You also want to make sure that, invoices, payments, and adjustments are entered for the year that you're archiving. And last, I would recommend running a 12-month income statement to look for any variances month over month and make those correcting entries. I mean, hopefully you're doing these, performing these steps every single month, which would be best practice. Next, we're going to move on to advancing to the new fiscal year. So once we've, kind of prepared to close 2022, we've gone through all of those steps I just discussed. You're going to want to make January of the next year your default posting period because you're ready to move into the next year. So these are the steps to move into January of the next year on your GL. We'll go to 1/6. You do have to be in exclusively. And what does that mean? If you click in the bottom right corner, change company, oops, let me close that. Change company /access, down here where it says open company exclusively, that is what you want to have checked. Nope, and it's saying that I am in exclusively, which I am. Down here it tells me I'm already in exclusively. I had the box checked. So we'll go back to 1/6 and we are going to click change period. So right now my current period is December because I'm in December, mostly posting in December, but I'm going to change my default posting period to January. Then I'm going to select change period. The system goes and runs an audit when you change the accounting period. It would then result here. It's telling us if the audit was successful or if any audit errors were found. The next PowerPoint slide talks about the period audit. The audit does need to be clean. If you do happen to receive audit errors during this process, I just wanted to also mention that periods 2 through 12 are now available there because the audit was clean. And so we've advanced to January, 2 through 12 open up. Back to if your audit error or your audit was not clean, My recommendation would then be to recalculate balances. So you do have to have exclusive access. You simply just recalculate. It would go through and make sure that all the tables in the background are good and everything balances, and it sometimes will fix audit errors. If the recalculate balance did not correct your audit error, you can run the audit error report and it would tell you what the audit error is. You then could go to Human Resources, Sage Support Knowledge Base, and then you could type the error into the search bar here. And it should result in the resolution for your audit error. The resolution may require you to contact Sage Support, which in that case you would need to put in a live chat ticket down here in the bottom left. So another step in preparing for the GL close, I'm on slide number 6 of our PowerPoint presentation. If you don't have that, just go ahead and email our office, our marketing team, and they will get that out to you. Preparing for the GL archive is where we're at still. You want to make sure that there are no 0, 0, 0, 0, basically unprinted checks that are left remaining to be printed. So, throughout the year, if we want to print a check in Sage, we can reference 4 zeros in the check number field, and then Sage would, basically see that as a check we want to print later. So before we close the general ledger, we archive the general ledger, we want to make sure that all of our check numbers are assigned. And so how do we do that? We're going to go to 2.5, and in this report printing window, we're going to want to change our accounting period to match the year that we're archiving. You're going to want to put in the transaction number of 4 zeros and the credit amount of 1 penny, and we're going to do greater than or equal to. So the results of this will give us a list of checks that we were going to print during the course of this calendar year that are greater than a penny. I will click on search, and there are no matching records found. If you did have records with 4 zeros, you just want to go back and make sure, did we print this check or did we not? If you did, you can go ahead and put the check number in. You can look in the general ledger in 1.3. You can also search using that gray display lookup window by transaction number, and you can search for 4 zeros. If you had any, you could double click on it and pull it to the screen, and the transaction number here would be 4 zeros. You could then update that 4 zeros to the check that you actually printed and then save it. That would be clearing that unprinted check. The next step in preparing to archive the general ledger is going through your jobs in 3.5. So if you'd like to remove any jobs during the archiving process, any old jobs, they must be in a status of closed or refused. So either 2 or 6. So if you have not been keeping up on that during the course of a year, keeping up on those job statuses, you do have the ability to mass update. You can go to update, close status. And then this is just telling you that you need to select jobs from the window list. Click OK. And now the whole entire job list pops open. You can go to current, and then you can select the jobs by dragging and dropping and dragging, or just double clicking on these, and they'll turn red. And then you can click insert selected items. And these are the current jobs. So once I do that, they're all going to move to closed in mass. It's a mass update. You also can do that for completed jobs that you want to get rid of, kind of mass update them the exact same way. I didn't update any jobs. But again, if you want to remove jobs from your system, from your existing database during an archive close, you would want to make sure that they're either in a closed or refused status. If the jobs have any open accounts payable or accounts receivable transactions against them in the current year, they will not be able to be removed. Not going to save this. I didn't make any changes. It's just, again, following through the PowerPoint presentation, we are going to be talking about preparing for the GL archive. If you use inventory, you're going to want to make sure that you run an inventory audit report. So in 12.5, this should be being done on a monthly basis anyways. Go ahead and click audit. And the system will run just like on the general ledger and let you know if there are any errors. If there are, you can click repair, and most of the time it would repair those audit errors if there are any. And don't be alarmed. I mean, I used Sage for many, many years as a user, and only a few times did I get an audit error on the general ledger. I never got one in inventory. Something else to ensure is being done, and you want to, just kind of end of year wrap up, is to close purchase orders. So in 661, in order to remove old purchase orders that have been fulfilled, if you no longer want them in your system, they have to be in a closed status. So I have seen before where companies do not have the auto close feature on. So at the end of the year, they're having to manually update the statuses of the POs that they want to have removed. To turn on the auto feature, you can go up to options, close automatically when balance is 0 or less, or when all quantities are 0. So if your company uses purchase orders, I definitely recommend that you turn on this feature, and choose one of these options. If you don't know, my recommendation is when all quantities are 0 there. And then the system will just auto close the purchase orders. So then during your GL archive process, you have the ability to remove those from your system. What you never want to do, at least I wouldn't recommend it, is go up to options, remove closed purchase orders. If you did ever want to do that, I would definitely make a backup of your company. That way you have record of those purchase orders, because if you don't create a backup and you click remove purchase orders, they're just gone. You won't have, historical records. So let's talk about the reports that I recommend that you print. They are in the PowerPoint presentation, slide number 8. But you want to run recommended trial balance, your balance sheet, your income statement, definitely your AR report, your aging, 313. I have 26 on this, but I really like 56. It's up to you. And then the AP report, you also want to run the aging there as well. 413. And my PowerPoint says 26, but here I also like 56. So either one, 26 or 56, really you're just trying to get to the total and have that history. You also want to run that project management job cost report that I was talking about, the 61621 report, and run that for the periods January through December to tie to your income statement. And these are all the reports that you're going to want to save in your year-end close folder. If you have service receivables, there's another aging here that you're going to want to run, 11, 1, 3, and 26 here. Just make sure that your period is, through December in all of these reports. And last report would be your inventory on hand report. So 1212, 21, or 41 is the WAC value report. This is the weighted average cost. I would run this report. So just following along the PowerPoint presentation, it says when you're ready, change the default posting period from December to January of the new fiscal year. And when you change that accounting period, which is in 1/6, which we already did, we changed our accounting period to January of 2023. When you do that, all the rest of the year opens up for 2023. Notice February through December is open. And just for best practice purposes, I would recommend locking these down. All you have to do is click lock on them. And that way it ensures that nobody accidentally keys into a future period. Once they're locked, you can click save. Sage does not require, just again, does not require that you archive the general ledger. So as of this point, after we cleaned up the data, we understand our balance sheet, we've gone through our income statement variances, we've reviewed and made sure that all of the subledger reports tie to our balances on our balance sheet, we would be good to go to advance to 2023. At this point, we would move on to the GL archive if we were going to be archiving our GL. So let's go ahead and move into archiving the general ledger. I did mention that you need access to this database administration tool. This is usually housed on the Sage server. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is back up your company. So my company is the GL Close webinar. And here is the backup location. It's an on-demand folder that Sage automatically creates. I'm going to create a backup. This is just telling me that it is available for 30 days. My backup is now complete. So the next step in archiving our GL is we're going to want to go to Archive Company Data. Archive our oldest fiscal year. See below that is the payroll year that we talked about a couple weeks ago during our payroll webinar. So we're going to go to archiving our oldest fiscal year, and Sage will tell you that you can use this option to remove the accounting data for a fiscal year. It says for a fiscal year, but it is the oldest fiscal year. So if you have 5 years open, what you would have to do is archive them in order, starting with the oldest one. Unfortunately, you can't archive multiple years at one time. So these are all of my options for archiving. I will choose my GL Close Webinar company. And as a reminder, you do need exclusive access. Then I'm going to create my archive. The archiving process is a wizard, so it guides you through the whole entire process. So it's pretty simple. This is just reminding you that it's going to remove the oldest fiscal year data and put it in the archive database. So what you will be left with is your company, all of the data that you did not archive, and then a separate database in the archives that you would have to log into to access that data. So again, this is just cautioning you to make sure that you've closed all of your, made all of your closing entries, you're ready to go. And it's also saying that you need 2 backups of the company before you continue. So I would stop what I'm doing and make another backup, just to make sure that you're good to go there. Go ahead and click next. Then the system will run a maintenance process. You can click begin preparation. So it's going to run the maintenance. It's going to make sure that everything looks good with the ledger. It's going to audit the inventory and create another backup. In some companies, depending on the size of your database, this may take a long time to do. So you want to make sure that you're prepared for this to take, if you've never done it before, upwards of, a couple hours. I have a company that this has taken 8 hours. They have a lot of data and they're archiving, 5 years back. So just definitely be prepared for the amount of time that it may take you. I am archiving in this webinar a sample company, which does not have a lot of data in it. So we're ready to move on to the next step. We have green check marks all around. Go ahead and click next. And this is where we have those options to remove, refused closed jobs. If we wanted to in all related records, it would remove them to, the archive database. Do we want to remove payable invoices that are paid or in a void status with no job number? Then these three have options with dates on them to remove service invoices that are paid, completed, or void, remove POs with a closed status, remove inventory allocations. So you have the options to pick those as well and put in a date. Typically, it would be through that year end. Oops. I'm just going to go ahead and put this date and copy it. And then you can click next. You're going to want to enter a name for the archive company. And I would recommend that this be consistent year over year. I always put the year first so that I know. I would also, put GL in the name. If you did have multiple companies in your database, multiple different databases for different companies within your Sage software, you may want to reference the company name here. That way, if you're ever going to look back at the archives, the GL archives, you know what company it is, but just by looking at the name. You also have to do this for the payroll archive. So that's why I recommend that you put GL in the name of your general ledger archive. And then on your payroll archive, you do the same thing. And if you keep this naming convention consistent year over year, it's going to be in a nice format in your company list of archives when you go to look for information. They'll just be right up against each other. So once you're done there, you can click Begin Archiving. So you're about to archive the data for 2022. All the accounting records will be removed from your current books, and you should have at least one backup. That said 1, but earlier it said 2. It also has already taken a backup. So this is another step in the archiving process that could take some time. This is the lengthy part of the process. So while this is working through its archiving process, what happens to Sage during this process? So as we talked about, jobs that are in a closed or refused status are removed from the system if you chose to do that. Payables invoices are removed. Closed purchase orders are removed. If, again, if these were the options that you chose. Inventory allocations with no job number, and then service invoices are removed from the system. The accounting data, all of the accounting data from that oldest fiscal year, that year that you're archiving, is removed and placed in that separate database. Then along with this, the beginning balances are all adjusted and retained earnings are closed out to current. So it's creating a brand new database for the archived GL data and is only accessible by toggling to the archive company list. So it looks like, those tasks are complete now. We can click View Results, and this just gives us, as far as, the maintenance is concerned, what the system did. So 50 payables invoices were removed and 2 inventory allocations were removed. So none of our jobs were removed. Nothing else was done. And that's probably because there's open transactions. In fact, for this example, I didn't have any jobs in a closed status, so it didn't remove any. We can click Next. The system then is going to back up the new databases. So it's creating an backup of the archive, and then it'll create a backup of your new database without the GL information in it that we just archived. So once this is done, we're going to want to log into our archive database and run some of those financial reports that we ran earlier in the live environment. And we're going to want to make sure that the numbers match from before we archived to after we archived. I always checked the trial balance. You want to make sure that those numbers match, and we do want to do that just to make sure that everything carried over properly. You want to just double check to make sure that everything that we asked it to archive was done. And then, just kind of peace of mind, if you will. So archiving is complete, as is stated here. Transactions are posted to period zero, update the beginning balances in the current books. So if you happen to have an entry that you missed, that you need to post to a company that you archived, you're going to have to post it in period 0. And period 0 will post in effect the beginning balance in the current books, and then you'll have to go back and create the entry in the archived company for December. So period 0 entries affect income and expense accounts and update the retained earnings account in the current books. Wants you to make another backup if you make a change to the archive database. Then we go ahead and click close. And now that GL archiving process is complete. So let's go ahead and log into Sage 100 Contractor. So here is our company list. Over on the left-hand side, these are our active companies. If I click over here, Show Archives, this is our list of archive companies. This is the one that we created with the X's in it. I'm going to open up with administrative rights. I just always do that as a habit, and I'm going to click Open. So in my archive database, again, I want to run those financial reports that we ran earlier just to make sure that they're the exact same numbers. This reminder pops up when you are in an archive database, and it tells you that the background is red in any archive company. This red is supposed to flag you that just as a reminder, you're an archive company, don't make any changes, that type of thing. So just some kind of maintenance or cleanup if you want to perform, these steps in the GL archive company. After you run your reports and making sure everything is good, if in the process of verifying and validating that those numbers are the same, if you find they're different, you may want to restore one of your backups from before archive and try the process again. That's why it's so important to take a backup in case something happened during the process. You can very easily go back and restore that backup. So just again, some steps that you may want to perform in the archive company after you've validated everything. You may want to change the background color. Maybe you don't like that it's red. You can do that in Utilities, Company Information. This reminder keeps popping up. It will keep popping up unless you turn it off. It's just telling you you're an archive company. This is telling you that as a reminder, are you sure you want to shut these reminders off? Yes. So in 7.1, down here where it says company color, you can change the background of your company database. And you can do this in your live environment too. So that's where you can change the background color. Another thing you may want to think about doing is going into security in 7.2.1 security groups and maybe disabling, turning all of these to no. That way nobody could accidentally change something and be able to save it in this archive company, because it could get confusing if you're not paying attention to what company you're in. Up here in the upper left part of your Sage desktop, it does tell you what company you're in, just as a reminder. Another thing you may want to do is lock future periods for posting. But if some, not everybody has access to save, then you don't necessarily need to do that. So that is your GL archive database. If you needed to access any of your archive data, you're going to have to come into this database to do it. It's no longer available and accessible in your active company. So back to our active company, now would be the time to go into your database and clean up your database prior to any entries for the new fiscal year. You can start with for vendors. You can now remove any vendors from the system by just going to edit, delete vendor if they're one that had all of their AP invoices removed. If they still have transactions, you're not going to be able to delete them. But if they're old vendors, you hadn't used them, you know that all of their AP invoices were paid and they were removed in the GL process, you can now edit, delete them. Also, now is the opportunity to go into 1.8 General Ledger Setup and make changes to your ranges. At every other point during the year, you're not able to make any changes to this GL setup. Now would be the time to do it, and is the only time that you can make a change before entries start being posted to them. That's why it's white, so that you make your changes. Once you start using the system, they turn gray and you can't make changes. Also, you have the ability now in 1.7 to delete any do not use accounts. If you wanted to turn departments on right now, you could. Just reorganize, restructure your GL. Right now would be the time to do it because you have the ability before you start making entries for the new year. So that wraps up this portion of the class that talks about archiving the GL and closing the calendar year. Now we're going to get into 1099 preparation. So we're going to switch gears here. In the PowerPoint presentation, I'm on PowerPoint slide 16. So the first step in our 1099 preparation is we want to make sure in accounts payable vendors 4.4 that our vendors are set up properly. So what does that look like? Let me just pull up a vendor here. If this vendor is a sole proprietor, has a social security number for a tax ID number, you want to make sure that their name is here in the owner field. If you look in the bottom left corner of the screen where Sage gives you that user prompt, it says to enter the business owner's name, and it's required for 1099 if the federal ID number is a social security number. So make sure that that's updated with the correct information. In the financial information tab of the vendor, you want to make sure that the federal tax ID number is here and that their 1099 type is here. That is a drop-down menu. I definitely recommend that, it's our old miscellaneous, 1099 miscellaneous is now NEC, non-employee compensation. Most of the time it's NEC or no, right? No 1099 there. So I would go through your vendors and make that designation. It's much easier to run reports if you have this complete, even if they're not getting one. Make sure that that's a no. If during the course of a year, for policy and procedure purposes and for best practice purposes, as you're setting up a vendor, you want to make sure that you have a W-9 on file before you get them set up. That way you can properly fill this financial information tab out. So if you don't have that policy and procedure in place, I would recommend for 2023 that you get that in place, that no vendor goes into the system without having that on file. And then you can scan that W-9 and attach it here so that it is, an attached document to the vendor. It's always readily available. Another thing you might want to think about going into 2023, it might be too late now to do this, but maybe not, is getting an electronic consent on file to process those 1099s electronically and send those to your vendors electronically. 4.5 contains this electronic consent form. So if you go to 4.5 electronic 1099 consent, you can select the vendors here that you want to send those electronic consents to. Once you get that back, going back to the vendor screen, you can check the box that you do have the consent on file, and here's the email address that you're going to be sending the 1099 to electronically. If you're not sending electronically and you're not having Atrix file your 1099s, I did put in the PowerPoint presentation the form that you need to buy in order to be able to print those out of Sage. I didn't put the form necessarily, I put the knowledge base article. And to get to the knowledge base, again, you're just going to go to, I went that fast, Home and Resources, Sage Support Knowledge Base. And I gave you the KB article. You just can punch the number in, 17395. And then that will tell you the forms that you need to order for your W-2s and your 1099s. So that is if you're going to be handling that yourself. For my new users that are going live or that went live in Sage this year, maybe in the middle of the year, maybe first, second quarter, those type of things, you want to make sure that you post your startup entries. So maybe you paid the vendor during the course of the year and we did not load that into Sage. You're going to want to make sure that you put that adjustment in Sage so that their 1099 is complete and contains all of the payments for this calendar year. If you go to 4.4 options and you go to 1099 balance startup adjustment, this is where you're going to want to put the adjustment date. So if we went live on April 1st, I can put in March 31st. It would give me the current balance where I'm at today, what I've paid them in Sage through 2022 in the system. And I would put in this field what I paid them outside of Sage in my legacy system. And then it would give me the resulting 1099 balance. So it would give me the current, what's in Sage, plus my startup adjustment, and then my result. This could also be used if you are paying the vendor in some sort of method that was outside of Sage, that you did not record in Sage. You can make the adjustment here. And this is under options in the vendor screen. Before we process 1099s, we also want to make sure that we're on the most recent version of Sage. The year-end updates that come out contain changes to tax forms, reports, things like that. So you want to make sure before you prepare these documents, these year-end reports, W-2s, 1099s, things like that, that you do update to the newest version. And how you can check what version you're on, Home and Resources, About Sage 100 Contractor. And right now I'm on 24.2.113. I'm on my payroll tax filing year of 2022. So I know by looking at this that I haven't updated my system to 2023. Otherwise, this would say that I'm in the tax filing year of 2023. And the newest version is 24.3 actually. So I haven't updated my system yet, but you definitely want to make sure after you complete your payroll for 2022 that you update your system to version 24.3. So you can use your current calendar year, or your current active year or live database, to process your 1099s. You don't have to go into the archive company. You can use this database to process those 1099s. 1099s totals are automatically accumulated by year. And so you don't ever have to reset any balances for 1099s either. You don't have to do that in Sage. So after you've run your final payables for, or check run for the year, sometime in January, you want to make sure that you review the vendor's 1099 data. So we can run 41561 is the report that you're going to want to run. 41561 vendor 1099 payments. You can populate the vendor type here if you wanted to. If you have maybe subcontractor set up and you want to look at them first, you can put your date range in here. You can do 1099 type to just add to the list, which I would recommend. In the bottom left screen, it tells you the types. So maybe I want to run this report for 1 through 4. So anybody that is going to be receiving a 1099, and run it to this screen. So this is our report. For all of our vendors that are set up to receive 1099s. I did get a question during one of the webinars. Actually, this is my second recording of this one because I had some technical difficulties during that first class, that first webinar for this class. So I'm re-recording it, but I did have a question come up that I thought was a great question, and I'm not sure that everybody caught the answer. But somebody asked, how can I run a report, or is there a report I can run to double check to make sure that I've captured every 1099 vendor? Maybe we don't have them set up. I just want to see who I've paid more than $600 to during the course of a year. You can run this report 51, payment invoice detail alpha by vendor, and you can run that for the year or your calendar year. If you hadn't archived yet, you could run that. Let's see, I'm going to change this to, oops. I'm going to take these dates out. I'm going to put in so this would result in everything that I paid my suppliers. If I'm just looking, kind of spot checking to make sure that I've got everybody. So Bishop Concrete Pumping, I wrote them 2 checks, and this is the total of the checks. Boyd Insulation Fireplaces. And if I was curious, I could drill down right from here and I could see if I have them set up to receive a 1099. I can make the change there and go back to my report. This is 10 pages, so it is, takes some time to go through and make sure that everything is set up properly. But this would be another good report to see how much you've paid a vendor during the course of that calendar year. So after you've validated that all of your vendors are set up properly and you've marked all of the ones that are going to be receiving 1099s appropriately, then you're going to want to run for 5 vendor 1099 forms. This is the form. You're going to want to select the year and click Run Report. So if in your system you may, you haven't updated your Atrix forms in a while, you may get a pop-up notification that there's an update. And it's a wizard. Just go ahead and walk through the wizard and update, just as I'm going to automatic update. And it will take some time. It says it's going to update the forms, those tax forms. I usually just click next here and I update everything. So Atrix is Sage's third-party business partner for tax filings. You can sign up with Atrix to e-file your forms. And that's, you know, your payroll forms, your 941s, your W-2s, those types of things. And it will give you the pricing and everything as, you know, once we get to the end of this. And what does that look like to have Atrix send those out electronically, at least for your 1099s here, because that's the process we're going through. Sometimes this process takes a few minutes. This is taking a little bit longer than I thought it would. So I apologize for that. Perfect. So that's done. Once I click close, it should automatically kick off running those 1099s, that process. This is a wizard as well. It walks you through the process. Perfect. So again, it's a wizard. This is asking if you want to test drive your data, the first 25 recipients, if you want to test drive with all of them, or if you'd like to start the process. And for the purpose of this webinar, we're just going to start the process. If you did decide to test drive it, it's not going to save your work. So if you find some issues and you make changes in the grid of the wizard or of the 1099 area window, it's not going to save those changes. So it's just going to verify that our tax information is set up. And where is this coming from? This is coming from your setup in 7.1 in company information utilities. Are we using one data file or multiple data files? So typically we're using a single data file, but if you have multiple companies in the system, you may be using multiple. This payer information just wants you to validate it. I'm going to change these 4 X's here. This is feeding from 7.1 as well, their company information in Sage. So if it's wrong, I would go to 7.1 and fix it, because that's also feeding to other tax forms, your invoices, things like that. Are you filing for the employer or are you a tax preparer? If you have state and local tax accounts, they would be listed here. Do you have any recipients who elected to receive 1099 forms electronically? If we did, we would say yes. If we don't, we say no. How do we want to have our Social Security number represented or the tax ID number represented? Truncated or show it in full? And then we click next. So as we're looking here, this is the 1099 grid or table of information. In the upper left area is a blue highlighted section, verify recipient taxpayer identification number. And then down in the grid here in the table, you'll see one column that's also highlighted in the same color. That is the column in which this direction is referring to. So it's saying to make sure that these are the right tax ID numbers for the recipients. If they look good, you can click next. Now it's telling us to check if the FEIN is a TIN. So is the federal tax ID number, is that number a tax ID number? If it is, the box needs to be checked. If it's a Social Security number, it wouldn't be checked. Next, verify the recipient's name. So first name, last name, middle name, this would be filling in, on those Social Security or sole proprietor types. Verify the recipient address. Again, the area is highlighted in blue, the area that it wants you to verify the information. And you can simply, just verify, click next, verify, click next. State and income tax withholding, verify all of the information. Once you're done verifying, this box pops open. Just letting you know that you can get complete W-2 1099 for $1.96 per employee or recipient. Next. So if you choose to print them yourselves, you're going to choose other options, and then you can print them down here. Print, print. So it's just telling you that given COVID, they're asking you to submit electronically as opposed to paper. But you can print your recipient copies, you can print your federal copies and your state copies here. That would be printing. It's free, obviously, except for you do have to buy your forms and stamps and stuff envelopes. So I would definitely recommend e-filing. You can e-file the whole entire, kit and caboodle if you wish. They'll print and mail your copies. They'll e-file your 1099 copies for the people that get them emailed. File your 1099, 1096. It does everything for you. I have 5 recipients, so it's a minimum of $24.95. That's the minimum. If I was going to do that, I would click next. Do I want a PDF copy for $34 plus $5 in shipping? I would say no, because I can print my PDFs right now. Clicking next. What state are we going to be filing information to? California. All of your states would come up here. Next. This is just a review of a list that we are going to be going through right now. We're going to go and we're going to see the federal copies, the state copy, recipient copy, and the payer copy. Click next. It's loading the tax forms as it states. So in the upper left corner of the screen, you're going to see how many steps are involved. This is report 1 of 5. This is the federal 1099 NEC. It tells you here to click print copy for your copy and then click next step. So you can print the copy, you can save it as a PDF. That way, if somebody loses it or they don't know where it's at, you can save it and it's there as a PDF. And then you can click next step. Now we're on 2. This is the federal 1096. Exact same thing. Print, save as a PDF, next step. This is the California. And I did want to mention, and I did want to show you that when they print these copies, because there are copies, it says record copy, do not file across the top of them. Because we chose to e-file. So it's just giving us a copy. So record copy. Next. If you chose to print these yourself, as opposed to e-filing, they would not say that record copy because obviously you're going to be printing them and saving them yourself. This is the California State Form, print copy, next. This is our payer 1099 NEC. You'd print your final. This is asking me if I want to print it. I can say yes, I guess. I'll save it as a PDF. And so now this is my copy here. And now it's connecting me to the Atrix website. So if you have enrolled in the Atrix e-filing center, then you would log in, put your username and password, you would complete the process at Atrix. I don't have a username and password, so I'm not doing that. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that session. So if I did choose to print them, you know, you could choose other options, and then you're going to go through that exact same process. It's going to give you the options again and again and again. So I'll just go ahead and quickly go through these. I'm not going to save any of them. There are 7 here now. So e-filing and printing, they are very similar in the steps. This would be where you're putting in your paper in your printer though and printing them. Oops. I would put my copies in and print. Put my paper in for my California. Next step. You obviously would want to print this first, but I'm just going to get to the end so you can see what it looks like. This is the instructions for the recipient of that 1099. You would want to print them and send that along with the 1099. I'm saying no here to print, but I want you guys definitely to say yes, obviously. So once we're done going through those 7 steps, you're going to get to the end here and it's going to tell you the last completed action, for these forms. These are your options here for actions. You can reprint, you can e-file and print, you can correct completed 1099s if you need to correct anything. You can completely start over. You also have the ability to look up the 1099 e-filing password there. When you're done, you can click next. Have you distributed copies? I am going to say yes. Since one or more have been distributed, starting over is not available. There it tells you if you need to go back, how to correct, and then you can click close. And now that process is complete. You can stuff your envelopes and stamp them and file them. So that is the 1099 process there. The last tidbit of information, or the last step in the class, is talking through, your options for help, year-end resources. So ETHOSystems, which is the company that I work for, you can call us or you can get to our website there. We have some year-end webinars going on for all different options for Sage 100, 300, Intact. There is a year-end procedure guide, and that's under Home and Resources, Product Documents, Year-End Guide that you can print out and refer to when closing the year. The knowledge base, right? So I use the knowledge base all the time. It's a great resource. Definitely go there. Sage City has a really great year-end area. I put a link here. If you just hold down the control key and click on it, it'll take you right here. There are checklists. We have Canadian and a US checklist. There's a timeline. But this timeline is more of a Q&A type of thing, but it's definitely, good information. So I would read through that. A payroll timeline, your vendor 1099 timeline. This goes, through exactly what we went through today, but it's kind of in a checklist, an order checklist. So you can do that. Your general ledger, close and archiving, definitely, everything that we went through today, check that out. Great resource there. And archiving your fiscal year, the steps for archiving your fiscal year. So everything you need to know with year-end is available there. Again, this is the link. Just hold down your control key and click on it, or copy and paste it into your web browser. And then Sage support, I have a number here, but you can no longer contact Sage support that way. If you need to contact Sage tech support, you have to put in a live chat ticket. And just to kind of close this class out, just to kind of bypass Peg, if you know that she can't help you, it's very simple. You can go to product, click on Sage contract product support. Go ahead and, I can't open up Sage. And then, but just click on a couple. It will definitely take you to your live chat. Hold for live chat. You want them to connect you. So you could bypass all of those questions and then get to live chat, basically. So it's going to ask you for your name, and ask you for your email address, and then you can go to live chat and start chatting with the agent. If you can't get through and you need something urgently, go ahead and email ETHOSystems. the support at ETHOSystems.com, and they will have a consultant reach out and help you. So I really appreciate you all joining me for this webinar today. If you have any questions, reach out to your consultant. And then you also have all of those resources that are available in this year-end, this PowerPoint presentation.